Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to stance into the Truth Bomb riff. My name is Patrick Lovell. I'm the producer with the $71 trillion Truth. I'm joined by my colleague in Truth, the legendary Ann Rabiola Miele, the powerhouse out of Chicago, living in Las Vegas, Nevada, and we were recording this at approximately 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday. Um, it feels like July. I was about to say July, but March 13th, 2026. And, I just got done recording with the new Untouchables, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it. But before we get rolling and get into this, I want to share with the audience my screen so I can introduce this evening's headlines as it pertains to kind of what we're all in the midst of. And I always open up to the New York Times because they are the nation's paper of record, even though they get a whole lot wrong. But they do get a lot right. But in terms of immediate important information as it relates to war, they probably have as many resources as anybody else in the business at the moment. And one headline says Trump says Iranians face big hurdle to overthrow the regime. And that is obviously the orange tart in chief projecting that, hey, we're opening up the doors for a civil war.
Yeah.
Please step in because you're going to lose if we decide to split because I'm going to taco or whatever comes from the volatility in the oil markets. Then we see down below here, U.S. made launcher fired missiles from Bahrain towards Iran. I've been looking at video off and on for the last couple of days of all of these different, big cities and these different sectors, adjacent to Saudi Arabia and UAE and Bahrain and so forth, these huge golden cities of money laundering and everything else that's associated with the, Dubai being the big one. But interesting that, for some reason, some of the press seems surprised that Iran would kind of take, shot at all of the different surrounding areas after being attacked. So that to me is a little bit of a jaw dropper. But further down below here, I thought this was interesting just to kind of set up, and we can talk about this as we move forward. But U.S. tech giants flock to the Persian Gulf. Now they're targets. That's interesting. I would want to know how Iranian intelligence knew where their locations were. I heard, through a whole variety of sources that the CIA got nailed in Dubai in Saudi Arabia, of all places. I said Dubai? I meant to say Riyadh. Pardon me. And but really, the most important thing in terms of everything I've been posting today is down here on the lower right. It says echoes of the '70s in what is now the largest oil shock ever. And of course, we see we're escalating more Marines and warships being sent to the Middle East, so on and so forth. And so I'm going to stop sharing there. But that's, you know, for me and for us, from the standpoint of the Clean New Deal, what I have been trying desperately to get everybody to understand, but I could never penetrate the American people's, ecosphere, the four walls of their existence, better than Donald Trump being able to force this giant shit sandwich down the throats of everybody, no matter where you are, who you are, what you are, how you are. You cannot escape the carnage. Now, some are more on the direct line of fire, aka Doge. They lost their funding, they lost their positions in academia, tall building law firms. It goes on down the pike. And, maybe every Tom, Dick, and Harry is now suddenly starting to see it at the gas pump, for example. Meanwhile, what we've been trying to get you to understand is that Donald Trump is not the creator, the architect, the engineer, the brain, the mastermind,
Oh,
anything
use that word with him. Yes.
behind what we're in the midst of. At best, he's a wag the dog idiot. I always call him the Mad Magazine Mad King. And because it's so ridiculous in the satire, i.e., one other thing I forgot to mention in terms of the front page of the Times this afternoon is, of course, Judge Boasberg slapped down and quash the Justice Department's underneath, Fox personality turned District Judge Janine Pirro, who's going after none other than the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, for subpoenas for mismanaging a what
Building, yeah.
not just rebuild,
Decorating, right.
like remodel this, that, and the other. This on top of just write down whatever avenue it is between the Federal Reserve and the White House. Trump is obviously engaged in this insane East Wing rebuild that a lot of people think has, some sort of bunker that he's never going to leave, paid for by all the billionaires of this country in a quid pro quo. That on top of it, everybody's now starting to understand after Pete Hegseth said this morning, hey, it'll get a lot better when David Ellison is running all things Paramount, all things, CNN, all things in our, mega merger and acquisition to hand over to Larry Ellison and whatever our version of propaganda, AKA all things happening in Putin's Russia over the course of the last 25 years, right? I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But the bottom line is that we continue to reveal to you we are the gateway to the $71 trillion revelation that the entire system hit. And for those of you who are Epstein, 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 you know that the government sat on literally decades of having information to take this stuff down. We saw Richard Kahn, this guy who's the accountant for Epstein, act as if he doesn't know who Epstein was and what he was up to. He was his freaking accountant. We saw President Clinton and Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton, basically act as if they're above reproach because the people asking questions from the Republicans are such incompetent idiots, and the Clintons are so good at doing the dance that they just look, like nothing ever happened. Even though we have pictures of Bill Clinton in hot tubs, that doesn't mean he slept with underage children. But to say that Clinton didn't know who Epstein was strains credulity, not to mention, as I've mentioned in a previous Truth Bomb, that William Burns, the former assistant director at the State Department turned director of the CIA during Biden, we have on the Epstein files, he was working with Epstein for a new job after he left the CIA. Hello. And to think that Hillary Rodham didn't know what Epstein was, especially in the Clinton Foundation and all of these other things, strains credulity, but not even where close to the Les Wexner interviews last week. And I could go on and on and on. But again, finally to tee you up, we've got the $71 trillion truth. What does that mean? We revealed the largest criminal conspiracy and cover up in history that never ended, that created the Epstein class, that has complete control of hijacking our government and our media, that has hid all of this information from Epstein through what it is that I'm telling you to create this incompetency of this, extinction level government under the direction of the biggest incompetent fools in the history of the world. I mean, literally, I got to add this in as well. Kristi Noem was literally engaged in testimony in front of in Congress in a congressional hearing with her and boy, his name eludes me at the moment. They were involved with literally the Mile High Club.
Lori Lewandowski.
Involved as ICE is taking place, as this carnage and suffering of this like sort of extension of this paramilitary junta of a bunch of dudes that are just like could never get a job anywhere else or may have been involved with J6, getting $50,000 bonuses to go and ended up shooting Renee Nicole Good and Alex Purdy, among other things. And they're on this G5 on the taxpayer dime, having freaking Austin Powers like shag affair. And it's just like, I mean, it's so absurd. And yet the carnage is insane. And we're literally going through this 7 layers of hell. And as you and I have discussed in the past, Dante's Inferno reveals at the base layer of hell, it's the lying politicians in power destroying everybody else. I think we're there, Roseanne. Swing for the fences, my friend.
I just watched, and I would encourage everybody to watch the latest episode with Patrick and the new Untouchables. And today there was a guest, new, and we can call him a new Untouchable because he was in the original 19 episodes of the new Untouchables, the Pecora Files. His name is Chris Swecker.
Because he was in the con.
Well, first of all, we knew him from the con. And then he was in the new Untouchables with Paul Peltier. Okay. So, see, I feel I know all these people. And I just absolutely love it. And what runs through everything I see, what runs through the reason why since August of 2020, I have spent the majority of my days, my hours, my afternoons, my evenings, my Saturdays and Sundays promoting the con, the new Untouchables, the Pecora Files, Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs, the con, all 760 something episodes of them. And what I see all the time, and I know because I've gotten close to some of the people in the con who were also in the New Untouchables, the Pecora Files, who are not in this batch of New Untouchables. I've become friends with them. And what is outstanding, what holds them all together is, for me, the word integrity for me comes first. Okay. Integrity to the law that we do have and a constitution that we do have, which I believe, and I've believed this since I've been a little kid, people don't think in those terms. They believe they are disconnected from what their neighbor does, what they do on the city councils, in the county commissions, in the state, much less the federal government. Okay. They do not believe that they are part of that, that what they do and the integrity that they have or don't have contributes to the overall culture of this country. And sure, I'm talking from decades of experience. Decades. When I see war today, uh, I I think of my friends in the neighborhood, the guys who died in Vietnam, the guys who went to Vietnam, the guys who were wounded in Vietnam, the guys who are now, I want to almost say, prisoners of the VA system because they got to get their benefits, but the benefits are so fucked up. Okay? Everything is so fucked up. And when I, as a teenager, saw a judge who let a murderer off because he was that young man was let off because his father was connected. His father had the money. See, the Epstein class not only has money, they have get out of jail free cards. Get out of jail free cards because we have a two-tiered legal system. That's what we got. And people, unless you have, I guess, been in the court system and spent some time in jail or even overnight or whatever, unless you have experienced that, it's it's outside of what people are thinking about. So when you talk about the integrity of the law, this is like a foreign concept to them. When you talk about knowing the branches of government, and when you talk about knowing your representatives, and when you talk about Citizens United, although they kind of understand Citizens United a little bit better, they are removed from that. Something that is going on now, like I bought gas today. I think it was like 30 cents more expensive than the last time I bought it. Okay. But see, I've gone through that before. I've gone through that in California in the early, what, 72, 73. Okay. But people of integrity and courage who have worked for the federal government, who took jobs with the federal government or were elected to a state position like the Attorney General, like Mark Dan was, those people all have this real sense of duty, responsibility, integrity, rules. You follow the rules. And real people don't have that kind of connection. Why I had that connection, I don't know, but I always did. I always felt like I was a part of this system. Because I could vote, I was a part of the system. Then, when I saw how screwed up it was, I felt like, yeah, I really am part of a system, and I have to do everything I can to share what I have learned, which started with the con, your work, the con that brings all these people who lost their livelihoods, their positions, couldn't get a job, and they were like really high level people in the banking industry, like Richard Bowen, okay, like Michael Winston. These people were sought out by, hey, Michael Winston was recruited by freaking Angelo Mazzillo to make uh uh to make Countrywide the Goldman Sachs of the West Coast. That means you make Countrywide the biggest scammer, stealer, liar, corrupt betrayer than you can possibly get. Michael Winston didn't know that, but he found out like in 3 frickin' days. 3 days. And they did horrible things to him. Horrible things to him. Okay. Now, I know that some of the new untouchables that I have become friends with are not of the same political persuasion. And I'm nonpartisan, so I'm going to say nonpartisan. They're not nonpartisan, okay? But I know that they're not of the same political background. They're not the same growing up in the neighborhood kid like I was. But what they all bring to light is integrity, courage. There are rules. You have to obey them. You have to be held accountable. There have to be ethics. There are no ethics in this clown car of a pedo, disgusting. I can't even think of the words. They're so terrible. And for people not to understand that, how terrible, how people could support the administration, support the corruption, support the wacko, wacko lawsuits that this administration, with these screwballs, bring in front of judges. They're going to get their ass handed to them on a platinum plus platter. Okay? Because, and this is what I think we really have to emphasize. We have the truth. We have the information. We have the facts. They are verified. We have people that are beyond intelligent, that are beyond caring, that know right from wrong, that know corruption, that know theft, that know it when they see it. And it doesn't have anything at all to do with political party. And they have given their lives. And they have given to you because of the respect that they have for you, Mr. Patrick Stewart Lovell, the respect they have for you and your work and what you put together and how you tirelessly fight for the truth, they have the respect to come week after week after week for free. And I am honored to share what they have taught me, have taught you, and what we in turn give to people out there. That's all I want to do. That's all I want to do. People, open your eyes. I don't care. I'm not even going to use the word WOKE, woke. Okay? Look, open your eyes, open your ears. Take some time to listen. When you are sick, and this country is sick, when you are sick, do you stay at home in a corner and not call a doctor or look for medicine or call up your sister-in-law and say, what can I take? You just sit there and die? Is that what you want to do? You don't have to do that. We got it. It's here. My hands are out. Okay. If you're in the Las Vegas area, you can come to my house and I'll cook for you too. But you got to take this. This country is sick. It is destroying itself at ludicrous speed. Go watch Spaceballs and you'll know what ludicrous speed is if you don't know. But this is what they got to have. We cannot let this country die when we have a plan. The plan is right in front of their face. You can stop the madness. Look, it ain't going to happen in two shakes of a lamb's tail, okay? But you can start now. What you got to do is when you look at the new Untouchables on this YouTube channel, when you look at that, you look at those people, look at their integrity, look at their knowledge, look at their professionalism, and follow their example. Okay? If you follow your sister-in-law or brother-in-law who don't know jack shit, why don't you follow people who've been in the game for years, who know how to care, who know how to act with professionalism, with integrity, with courage, with honesty. They don't take bribes. They don't bow to political pressure. That's all you got to do. It's freaking easy. You want to get well? Grab the plan. Grab the Clean New Deal. Watch this channel. You can even go back and watch all kinds of stuff, which I do. And I'm picking out stuff from older truth bombs, and I'm putting it on Blue Sky to show people how relevant something that you recorded 2 years ago is just as relevant now. And it's more important now because the shit has hit the fan, baby. And it's on. The fan has a speed called ludicrous speed, and that's where it's at. And that's what's going on. And you don't have to suffer. You don't have to. Stop the madness. Look at the plan. Watch us. Listen. Okay. I ain't no big cheese. I'm just me. Okay. I ain't no fancy dancy nothing. But boy, I know right from wrong. Do you, people? Do you resist? Resist. Yeah, I've been resisting a hell of a long time. Okay. But you got to resist with a plan. You go out there and you resist with a plan. And what it's done for me since August of 2020, it has made me stronger. It has made me physically more able to get out there and do what I love to do. This is not work to me. This is not work. I don't call it work. This is what I love to do. And I'm going to keep doing it until I can't. That's all. Now you can talk, Pitzer.
You sure?
Go ahead. Now you can talk.
You're on a roll, and I loved every bit of it. I'm trying to think back in my uh, memory bank here. Some of the key things that you said that I think are incredibly important to expand upon. I think the first thing is, just for some context, like what we're talking about here, cutting straight to the chase. I said at the beginning, I'm the producer with a $71 trillion trip. What does that mean? Well, everybody's on the same page about the Epstein class. They're above the law. There's two layers of law. So what does that mean? For those of you who know anything about American history, we were born in a revolution because there was two tiers of law, one for the king and one that we tried to create what ultimately became, the Bill of Rights, Constitution, and all things that the law is supreme. Okay, separation of powers, all of that. And yeah, I'm highly aware of all of the flaws that we've had the whole time. It's called in order to form a more perfect union for a reason. But in terms of Roseanne's sort of, I'd say, framing and also her long lens, when she was talking about, first of all, her friends from the neighborhood who lost their lives in Vietnam, I did come across an article today, and I do remember, um, how influential and what a huge impact. I mean, I was just a kid when it started out, or when it was ending, I should say, but it had such a huge effect on really, I'd say, my development years is the Vietnam War, and there was 1,000 people a week, a day, that were coming back in caskets, as you may recall. Yeah, of course you recall. And there was just such turmoil, and it was in the midst of all things civil rights that led to, the student protests and all of those things that you were in the midst of, which really forced, quite frankly, at that time, a reckoning by way of journalism was at the highest apex of everything. People wanted to know what the fuck was going on. And of course, that culminated in a significant way with all things which had a huge impact on you, Watergate, and all of the different things that you've talked about, particularly as it relates to Agnew and Spiro Agnew and all of the other incredibly important stories that came from that era. But I use that as the lens, as I mentioned earlier this morning, or at the beginning of this dialogue. Secretary of War, Secretary Chump, what do they call him? Keg's breath. I mean, this guy is a fool. He was on, I mean, he came out of Princeton, but he was on Fox News and he's worried about his hair. And this guy's, in addition to Trump making proclamations that we're in this until we have, what did he declare the other day? Which is, of course, what FDR said as he entered World War II. Nothing short of what happens when the enemy completely caves. I can't even think of the name. There's no negotiation. It's just you're going to accept our terms, unconditional surrender, right? And they're talking about unconditional surrender as Trump, McCankle's taco tits that he is, that was a five-time deferment, fortunate one who didn't serve ever in, in the military, who's using it as his own private security force, which is just beguiling considering all of his failures over the course of decades and his clear criminality that was involved with the likes of the mob, and how many times that we know from David K. Johnston that DAs failed to take him down both in Atlantic City and in New York City. And then, of course, all things Epstein. Okay. And we get this situation where we have this cabinet. I remember back to this last November 7th when it was announced that night. I thought it was going to be several days before we had a conclusion on the 2024 election. But immediately it was clear that the Democrats had lost both houses. We had already lost, the Supreme Court, and media was well on its way to being this continuation of everything I'd been in the mix of for now over a decade. The reason I had to become the producer that became the guy with the $71 trillion truth is because of the failure of media. Now, for those of you who watch our truth bombs, you know what I've been in the midst of. Just a couple of highlights. I interact with the New York Times at the highest levels, Deputy Investigations Director of the New York Times, who I actually said face to face while we were talking about Epstein and the revelations of all things, the relationship with JP Morgan Chase. I'm like, David Enrich, it's 2026. Why wasn't the New York Times reporting this information over a decade ago? And that happened to be kind of, shall we say, the I don't know, baseline of what I asked Chris Swecker today. And so when Roseanne is referring to the new untouchables, she's referring to people of high ethics and integrity. And I do want to say that you had mentioned in your, stream of consciousness that, it's so beguiling to think about the destruction of ethics. This is a RICO presidency. This is a crime syndicate. This is way past ethics. And it was all the plan from the beginning to get this transactional idiot who's a reality TV star within the notion of trying to keep everybody's attention swayed or overwhelm them in a reality TV sitcom kind of way with personalities and who might get voted off the administration island, so to speak. And what we saw earlier with Kristi Noem, as we talked about, and today with Hegseth worried about his hair, while they're talking about unconditional surrender, while this war is potentially spinning out of control and global markets are, roiling. And it came from a background in the neighborhood, understanding the daily machine, which was, it didn't matter really, it was Democrat in name, but it was definitely an authoritarian, homegrown, ham-fisted control of the city of broad shoulders in a way that probably had the Irish and the Italians and the Jews and all of everybody in the bank for different areas that they happen to be, they had their territory more like gangland style. And you understood corruption. And in fact, I gave you some incredible I gave you just really a big high five a couple of weeks ago when I just happened to watch a fantastic documentary on the great New York Times journalist turned independent who did all sorts of stuff in Vietnam, whose name eludes me at the moment. I'll come back to it, but he's one of the best in the business, Pulitzer and everything else. Gosh darn it, I can't think of his name at the moment. Anyway, and he's a legend.
Harry,
Huh?
Harry, Henry, Harry. His name was
Don't worry
his
about it.
first.
It'll come back to you know
Yeah.
how I roll. It always comes back to me in a second once I start. My memory is really interesting. So, but he credited the Daily Machine at teaching him the sort of the rounds. It took him around the understand how power works and how absolute corruption corrupts absolutely. But here we are in this moment, like you're saying, and you're appealing to people that it's like we've got the plan. You can go out and you can protest. You can be a part of No Kings. You can do 50 million things. You can follow anybody you want. You've probably either you know, I don't know, adhere to the Clinton side of the Democratic Party, which would, get you into the Obama side, or you're progressive and you're on the Bernie and the AOC sort of things and Zohran Mamdani and yada, yada, yada. None of them have a plan. None of them have a plan requisite the corruption. None of them speak to corruption. The closest you get to a plan is that we're not Donald Trump. Their
And
plan is
there's
that
no plan.
let's embarrass Trump and the administration over Epstein because of the failure of Pam Bondi and, of course, Kash Patel and what we were discussing with, Chris Wecker, who was a nearly 3 decades long veteran who was at the highest levels of the FBI, director, assistant director of all things white collar investigations for the FBI. In fact, as I was reading through his bio, it said things like he was in charge of all 8 divisions of the FBI, and he oversaw the FBI's involvement with the Iraq War, among other things. So, I mean, we're talking at the highest levels of the FBI. And
Well, and he knew Acosta. Okay.
he was like, wait a second, this isn't the bureau, but he said it started to be it started to become a political enterprise based on some of the stuff that Comey was involved with. Okay,
Comey.
a lot
Oh,
of Democrats are going to agree with that because of what happened with Hillary Rodham Clinton on the tarmac right before the election, and then many other things, right? But he was almost you could see it in his face where he was so ashamed of what the bureau has become. And he was basically making not light, but sarcasm in a satirical way towards all things Kash Patel. And he kept referring, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I've seen it all over social media since we concluded our recording, that the FBI has become a Make-A-Wish Foundation. And then all of these things involved with the UFC, and that they're going to train FBI agents in Quantico. And it's just, again, another Monty Python, National Lampoon satire of bullshit in the midst of Doge, where 500 million pieces of data in Social Security has been hijacked for the techno bros who've got their tech operations in Iran or in the Middle East that Iran's starting to strike, that is involved with this long-term play that, Trump is destroying the United States. We know of all things ICE. We know that they're building all of these secret facilities around the country that states aren't approving. And we're talking about warehouses that are going to become concentration camps or gulags. Not to mention, imagine how hot it's going to be in Arizona and Nevada this summer. And I guarantee you, they're going to be like, imagine if it's packed wall to wall with people that get picked up off the streets, including people that are American citizens, right? And ICE and everything that is just collapsing. In addition to what we discussed, the administration has welcomed Wall Street financiers to
that
become
made me crazy.
to work inside the Pentagon. Now, that's always been a thing. The Pentagon hasn't passed any audits for now probably decades. The trillions of dollars that are in question are beyond comprehension. Going as far back as the Vietnam War, I remember when we had news that there were nuts and bolts that cost like $12,000, for example. Okay, the hybrid mix of the financial military industrial complex on top of the oil financial paradigm is exactly what I have been revealing to you through all of my collective work since I started this journey more than 13 years ago. But my first documentary film, which I'll put in the description below, is Forward 13 Waking Up the American Dream. And Roseanne, it's as if you watch this, I filmed it yesterday, not 13 years ago. All of the issues that we're talking about, I identified, explored, and revealed 13 years ago. Do you want to react to that part real quick?
See, here's the thing that I just want to add is that when you say what you just said, and we say the $71 trillion truth, unless people pay 7 or 8 or $10 a gallon for gas, the 71 trillion dollar truth doesn't hit them. $10 a gallon for gas hits them. $12.
Okay, wait a second. Let me interrupt. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes and no. Okay, so my appeal to anybody watching this, first of all, you got to check everything else that we do. You got to like, subscribe, and share, and we want you to come on board. Why? Okay, are you disgusted, outraged at everything we're talking about on top of another endless war for oil? For whose benefit? So when Roseanne said earlier, in addition to making the reference to the Vietnam War, she also said, I hadn't seen this sort of fluctuation since the 70s. Well, yeah, that's the whole point. And we're right into another volatility period where we're most likely going to see, gas lines, this, that, and the other, on top of the fact that they just destroyed all environmental regulation. So there's no incentives to create the electric cars and the renewable energy paradigm that's been going down that path. So if that infuriates you, you're going to want to understand what the $71 trillion truth is. You're going to want to understand everything that we're talking about. Okay. But further to that point, Roseanne, when you're saying they refuse to pay attention until it's $7 to $8, then I'm thinking to myself, okay, really? We had a financial crisis 14 years ago, of which tens of millions of people got their lives destroyed. Thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions wound up in the streets. Tens of thousands committed suicide. Many, many, many more had divorces. Their lives were shattered. How much pain do they need to endure that they haven't already endured? My
And where are all those people who
my
got
feeling is that
close?
my feeling is that they're already shattered. Okay, I saw during both the 2016 election cycle and the 2020 cycle, and quite well less so the 2020 cycle, but more so the 2024 cycle, where 13 million people didn't show up to vote. People stick their heads in the sand and go, "Yeah, I don't have something to vote for, or there's nothing I can do. It doesn't speak to me, so I'm just going to let it be, and I'm going to wipe my hands of it." You're responsible for us slipping into authoritarianism. Actually, I take that back. The system knew they could destroy it.
That's right. The
So they
system knew
did.
they'd check out.
They destroyed you. They knew you'd check out, and they beat you down, and they beat you down, and they beat you down, and they knew you would give up, that you wouldn't ask the questions, that you'd accept the terms that they've given you, and maybe your life's in disarray, and most likely you're not into it this far. If you are, I don't know what the demographics of people who are listening this long are. I wish I had that information, but the people that I'm trying to reach are people of good character, people who teach their children not to lie, steal, and cheat, people who follow the law, people who are smart, people who understand dynamism, people who believe that anything is possible, but understand everything is possible, both good and bad, given what we're looking at. But the will to make things right comes from integrity, comes
That's
from character. I learned that when I made my first film, where I explored there's two columns of our soul. You've got character, integrity, and dignity versus hypocrisy, duplicity, and complicity. That's the battle for our soul, right there. And everybody skews one way or the other. And most people I find these days, as opposed to the group of people that you were talking about, they don't have character. They don't have integrity. They'll take shortcuts. They'll take payoffs. They'll lie, steal, and cheat to get out of this, that, and the other because they see everybody else doing it. And they're like, That's the way it's done now. I know children, young children, 20, I mean, I'm talking about youth that are coming up in this system right now. All they know are their phones, the bling, the crypto, the shortcuts, the things that aren't character. Because why? Our entire system is a failed, calamitous state. We're a third world country with nukes. Why? Because the law doesn't work. It's all masked in this bullshit that was a National Enquirer presidency, of which everybody in media was in on it because Trump was good for ratings. Meanwhile, he's working with Putin, he's working with money laundering, he's working with Epstein, he's working with every major bad character that exists, and many of whom went to prison, many of whom actually died. But he kept squirreling out of it one way or the other. The only time he got nailed was for his $25 million assessment for Trump mortgages. Not mortgages, sorry, Trump University.
University.
Right. Okay. But he was involved with so much more, as we know from David K. Johnson. He was literally laundering money with drug dealers, known drug dealers, long before the Russians got involved. He was involved with getting bailed out by, the Rothschilds long before that. And we know all of the different semantics of his involvement with the Middle East and Kushner and Saudi and this, that, and the other. It's a pay-to-play scheme where he's pulling billions of dollars to destroy the United States. And what are the American people doing? Literally. Now, millions are starting to go, well, I'm going to go to the No Kings rally. Millions are going to put really clever, whatever on their signs that explain whatever their issue is. And they're all going to, in a collective uprising in this groundswell of really being fervently disgusted with what's going on, but without a plan. Nobody's got a plan. I'm sorry, Indivisible doesn't have a plan. They just want everybody to show up. The Democratic Party is hedged. If you're in the DNC with Chuck Schumer and everybody else, you've been playing with this corruption the whole time. I say Elizabeth Warren, as smart as she is and many things that she's done, throughout her career, like she can identify a lot of the problems, but she plays by the rules of the corrupt. Bernie Sanders always says the same thing he's been saying for the last 14 years. AOC didn't know RICO was an actual crime. And there's reasons she said that, and it's stupid. But the long and the short of it is, no matter how good they appear to be, how much they care about the working class, how much they care about people in general, how much they want to be against no war, they don't have a plan that is requisite this insane bulldozing of corruption. So who does?
We do. It's
We
right here. The clean new deal, baby.
We do. So let's address this one at a time, and then we'll close out of this, because I think that we've tried to hook him, and hopefully, if you've stuck around this long, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, then what's the plan? Well, first of all, we say what the plan is every single day, all day. So all you have to do is go to Patrick Level Presents the Clean New Deal .com, or you can go to thecleannewdeal.org, both of which I'll put in the descriptions below. Okay, but we're going to run through the precepts and the 4 questions right now, because it is imperative that we make them relevant to what we're all going through at the moment, okay? So first and foremost, how many of you out there are infuriated by all things ICE, the overreach, and the murder, for example, and there's much more than the 2 that I'm going to mention, but of Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy, right? Minneapolis inspired us to be strong when they were out protesting in negative minus 22-degree weather against all odds. And man, did they show up, and they put up, and Bruce Springsteen ended up doing a song. U2 did a song, and it's got the national zeitgeist for however long it's going to hold our attention. And it will hold our attention for a long time because of the murders, right? But at the same time, underneath those murders is our first question of the 4 questions. And what's that first question illuminate?
What's qualified immunity that allows the police to kill people and shoot you without paying any price? You can do it.
They're an armed force. That means in a Gestapo or a fascist force. If they can murder with impunity,
They can.
that's a fascist force. What do I always say? Corruption burns and fuels fascism, right?
That's
So,
right.
so if you're anti-fascist, you've got to understand that qualified immunity is a thing that many of us heard Stephen Miller, and I haven't seen Stephen Miller for 2 months. He's been sidelined. But Kristi Noem, of course, and the rest of it, and Donald Trump above all else. Oh yeah, no, they've got a license to kill. They've got qualified immunity. That's been going on in the United States for well over a decade with police officers all over the country who can shoot to kill, and that basically created Black Lives Matter. Now, for the record, and I say this all the time, I am not against the cops being able to shoot to kill. I would have liked them to shoot to kill on January 6th, defending the Capitol against an outraged mob of white supremacists and mercenaries from Blackwater. I would like to have seen them all put in prison and maybe many more really, shot in the line of
No pardons.
okay, because that was war. Okay, that was civil freaking war. But what happened? It turned into this whole, insanity that ultimately they all got pardoned, and here we are. Okay, so how in the world is it possible that the cops can be above the law? Well, that's the second precept or question, I'm sorry, of the four questions that set the reality of what our system is. You have to ask yourself, who are the guys in robes, Roseanne, and what do they have?
Judicial immunity. The Supreme Court today is bought off. Judges all over the place. I saw judges all over the place. You cannot have what's judicial immunity.
So the point on that, as it relates to the Clean New Deal, is look, you said earlier, Roseanne, that Americans don't have a clue how the system works, or they just can't get their heads around how they fit in. And like to think about, for example, the new untouchables that are in the highest levels of these institutions of the federal government that had character and integrity, that carried out the will of the American people, predicated on the law. We know that. You know that. You know that based on the con. You know that based on all of our podcasts and everything else. The American people writ large don't fully understand that, but I'm sure there are millions of you out there that still believe that the law is the law, that those in power will be held to account, that if they do wrongdoing and if there's evidence of such, that the law will do what the law does to hold the power to account. No, they don't. And nor do they understand even the system. They understand baseball. Let's put it this way. They understand sports. But to give you an idea in baseball, for example, we know how we have minor leagues. We have single A, double A, triple A, and then we have the majors. And then we have the pipelines of the different major teams. And we know how players go up, go down, depending on how the thing is. And most Americans that love sports can fully digest that and they understand that. Do they know the court system? No, they have no idea. They don't understand all the different variables of what the courts do, both on a state level, on a city level, on a county level, or on a federal level. And it's a giant system. And on the federal level, at the apex is the Supreme Court. Then you have the appeals courts. Then you have the district courts. There's 13 appeals courts. There's 98, district courts. And then from there, there's all sorts of different federal courts that deal with specific, things like bankruptcy or tax fraud law, this, that, and the other. But the Supreme Court is the apex, and they are the final arbiter of all the law. And the way the law works is that, and I like to watch, for example, the Lincoln Lawyer. He's in Los Angeles. Stuff that happens in Los Angeles might not be relevant to stuff that happens in Lincoln, Nebraska, but there might be a precedent that takes place in Los Angeles that then works its way through the Supreme Court that then will have an impact on Lincoln, Nebraska, because that's how it works. There's precedent, right? So we have these 9 Supreme Court justices that over the course of now decades have been corrupted. And to the point where you've got 6 Supreme Court justices that have been handpicked by all of these different conservative voices. Leonard Leo is the key player here, and ironically, Donald Trump, basically tried to humiliate him about 4 months ago, or actually even closer to what happened with all of the tariffs. But the long and the short of it is, the Supreme Court has betrayed the United States. It has made not only police above the law, right, but it also made the president above the law. Now, for those of you who might remember during the last year of the Biden presidency, I was like, why isn't he using that to arrest Trump and to take out the Supreme Court? He's above the law. But of course, Biden was doing nothing. And then he ended up being all things, Winston or,
Neville
Neville
Chamberlain.
Chamberlain, sorry, Neville Chamberlain, shaking hands with the lead insurrectionist in the White House after the Supreme Court said that the Constitution no longer matters. Guys, the level of corruption that has created qualified immunity, judicial immunity, and the executive presidency collectively is called tyranny. Now, just a quick open question, and I'd like you to answer it, Roseanne. What was the purpose of the United States to begin with?
We were supposed to overthrow tyranny, overthrow the monarchy. That's what we
When
want,
no one was above the law,
you know.
right? And that absolute power, no, that power had to be held account, no matter who. Isn't that Lady Liberty and blind justice, right?
Yeah, right,
Is that
right.
what we are? No,
No,
of course
no.
not. And so you, the American people, have got to wise up. You got to wise up. If the Democratic Party isn't saying, hey, we're going to bulldoze this system where the Epstein class is all going to be held accountable, okay? Which Ro Khanna says, and you hear Tom Massey, they don't really know what they're going to do because this goes so deep and so far, and they can't even get even the basics down, let alone the financials on this whole thing. And they don't even know how to ask the questions, quite frankly. And
Well,
that goes on
that's
both
yeah,
sides of the aisle, right? We just saw the questions of the Clintons. We just saw the questions of Les Wexner. I could have run circles around every member of Congress who asked questions because they didn't even know what the public record was, let alone what this latest information is. I do give a lot of credit to Ro Khanna. He could, but his colleagues, they're way just ridiculous and they're not pros, okay? That's why you want pros like the new Untouchables doing these investigations, not Congress in this particular case. But that's all we got left, and it becomes a political hot potato. The fourth question, and I'll review again, the four questions to understand the lay of the land is what is qualified immunity, what is judicial immunity, what is presidential immunity, and then finally, what is the electoral college? What is the electoral college?
the Electoral College. I'll use the example. You got Wyoming, small state. They have people who have power, money,
They
influence.
have a lot of billionaires because their tax code.
Yeah. Their electoral votes count, and they have a small
They
population.
just have more legislative influence because of the power of what they can do within their legislature versus what can happen in other states, such as California,
California
with 50 million people, right?
or
50 million
Illinois.
people,
Yeah,
50 million people are less powerful than a state with
but
600,000 people
right.
legislatively. Okay. That's one side of it. But really, the tricky side of this thing is it's just control of the minority. And they've done this now in several elections, particularly back in 2020 with the hanging chads between George Bush and Al Gore. But
Okay.
ultimately, in what happened with Trump because of the swing states. And there was all sorts of methodology of insanity, particularly Jim Crow laws and what the great work of Greg Palast showed that 3.5 million votes were purged from the records because of old Jim Crow laws. And the way they do it is just insane. But there was more to it than that. There was elector slate fraud where in the swing states, they used fake electors to try to steal the election. Okay. That happened in 2020. That didn't get prosecuted. That was part of what was happening in Fonnie Willis's investigation down in
Yep.
Georgia. But it also happened again. Well, I should say it didn't happen again that we know of. I wouldn't be surprised. They seem to be pulling out the tricks. Who's they? Elon Musk, whoever was going on, the anomalies. Yes, I think the election was stolen personally. But here's the thing: did Kamala Harris challenge it? Did Biden challenge it? No,
Nope.
they just accepted it. And the question is why? Okay, but that's a whole nother story. They gave it up.
Yes.
I will just say this. For those of you who go Epstein, 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 the people who are saying what I'm about to say are the victims of the Epstein sex trafficking ring. They have told us time and time again, and you do hear Ro Khanna echo this quite a bit. It was four administrations that had the information that's ignored it and sat on it. Okay.
Yep.
There's no way in hell you can pin this completely on Trump. It's everything that made Trump possible, okay, or inevitable, I should say. And
Yep.
that's the whole reason we have created the Clean New Deal, okay? My journey has gone from the 2008 great financial crisis to where I made first Forward 13 Waking Up the American Dream, which gives you the entirety of paradigm, the paradigm of power, which is the financial, fossil fuel, military industrial complex we might as well add in technology or techno bros, and then of course intelligence CIA. Those are the five major players. I mean, we got big agriculture, you've got big pharma, you've got big media, and they're further down the list. But what I just told you is kind of the hive that controls the system. I learned that after 9/11 and what that means. Okay. And what that means is that they entrenched the fossil fuel financial complex more so than we had the opportunity in the late 90s to create a renewable energy paradigm where the last 25 years of mayhem have created this Epstein class and this monstrosity of the Godzilla or Frankenstein of Trump, right? And the MAGA zombie apocalypse. It's like the worst stuff we've ever seen in our lives. And so how did it come to be? The billionaire class got trillions of dollars for free in the aftermath of the 2008 great financial crisis, where we broke all laws and media sat on it. Nobody talked about it. I'm the only guy in the country with my colleague Roseanne that says it openly and plainly. And if you want to see the information and you want to cite it and you're a journalist and you really want to get hip to this whole thing and you want to doubt my credibility, please, by all means, dig in and see for yourself, especially if you have the educational capacity to understand what I'm revealing to you. But if you look inside the Clean New Deal at www.thecleannewdeal.org, you look at the top section, you go to white paper, scroll down to Federal Reserve Act 13.3, and it's all there. It's all fucking there. Okay. And who's going to actually do that? They're not going to do that from the Washington Post. Why? Because none other than Jeff Bezos was a recipient of this sort of situation. How about the New York Times? The New York Times basically is the paper of Wall Street. Who got bailed out? Wall Street. For what? The largest criminal racketeering enterprise in the history of the world that never ended, which is the 2008 great financial crisis. And oh, yeah, by the way, Epstein was involved up to his eyeballs, as was Donald Trump. Okay? So those are the four questions that reveal to you we're not a democracy. We don't function as a capitalist system. We're a social, we create socialism for the mafiocracy, okay, which is the criminal class. I always say that we're not a democracy. We're not a capitalistic country. We're a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate that uses the full faith and credit of the United States to backstop the mafiocracy that has now created fascism. That's called corporate fascism, i.e., corruption burrs and fuels fascism. That's what I've learned over the course of the last 14 years. Does anybody want to challenge me on that? Put it in the description below. Challenge me on any level. Do some investigation. Don't be like, hey, who are you? What do you know? Look into what I've got. I'll put in the trailers to my films and what I've done and who I'm involved with, and you'll see I'm the most legitimate guy on your feed right now, tomorrow, the next day, and the day after that. I'm the most legitimate voice in the country that's going to tell you this alongside my colleague, Ann Rabiola, and hopefully millions of you that come on board to learn how to speak the same language. And what are the same language with the precepts of the Clean New Deal? What is the number one precept, Roseanne?
We have to create a modern day Glass-Steagall that separates commercial banking from investment banking, and we have to ensure that the full faith and credit of this United States will not be used to fund criminals in suits with no shame.
That was absolutely brilliant. And I'll tell you, for those of you who were kind of like scratching your head and going, nah, that's not possible, what Roseanne just said. Listen, I need you to understand this is the equivalency, okay, of you discovering we've got aliens and the government's known it the whole time. Or every single person on video in the world that was involved with the Epstein files, okay? Raping children. If you had that information, I think honestly, both of those would still be tiny in comparison to the federal government backdooring tens of trillions of dollars illegally
over 4 administrations,
that
not one, not two,
destroyed
not
that
three.
destroyed literally hundreds of millions of people using the courts to do it. What Roseanne just said was exactly right, and it leads to what many of you have in the back of your minds, but at the same time, it fits on the other side of the coin from creating a new Glass-Steagall Act. What is that, Roseanne?
And that is to get rid of Citizens United. Stop it. Everybody, people say it, but they don't understand. You can, if you say, stop Citizens United right away, and you don't set up a new modern day Glass-Steagall to stop giving the criminals in suits with no shame the money on our dime who never get held accountable, so what? You can get rid of Citizens United, but they're still gonna get the money.
That's the whole point. Look, what Roseanne just said is so brilliant from this standpoint. Look, I always make the analogy that Citizens United is dark money in the shadows, right? You can't track who's doing what for what purpose and who they're giving it to and what the relationship is. And that was legalized by the corrupt Supreme Court, right? Back in 2012 during FEC versus I can't remember the exact corollary, but ultimately the nature of the metaphor is imagine all of the victims they got roofied and trained by the magical experience at the P Diddy Wonderland, right? They were seeking, trying to get some leverage and become a famous singer, this and the other. Next thing they know, they're like drugged and they're raped by many people, and whatever that might encompass. And then ultimately they got to stay quiet because that's why they get in these embarrassing situations where their careers are held. My point is, nothing happens good in the shadows, okay? First and foremost. But the bottom line is, they figured out how to get unlimited money because Congress is supposed to have the power of the purse. But the Federal Reserve has turned out to be the power of the purse since 2009. And ironically, again, to bring it back to Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, and all mainstream media today is like, oh my God, you can't get rid of Jerome Powell for the independence of the Federal Reserve, and because Trump is trying to make a big deal out of him redesigning, engineering, redecorating the Federal Reserve and all of that, while he's doing the East Wing and yada yada yada. Jerome Powell was up to his eyeballs in insider trading.
That's
The
right.
the Federal Reserve is the largest corrupt enterprise in the history of the world that nobody understands, and that's what we're telling you for the system. This is all a dog and pony show for political hopscotch, just like, quite frankly, Epstein has become between the Democrats and the Republicans. Okay, so that's that. So now we move on to, everybody always asks, where are we going to get the money to pay for it? What is the third precept of the Clean New Deal?
The third precept is we can show you how we can use $71 trillion dollars.
As a starting point.
Right, because it's still going on in much better ways than to give it to criminals and to give them free get out of jail free cards. Because look, don't we want to uh, go to get, we want to go to renewables so that we can get off of fossil
And
fuels,
the endless wars.
uh, you know, and the wars. What does the wars do? Wars make money. Wars are real quick, fast ways to make money.
And they
Who makes,
centralize power.
right?
Yep.
Who makes the money in the wars? The poor people and middle class people die. And look, even in the frickin' French Revolution, man, okay, who died? The people on the frickin' barricades who couldn't pay for bread, the aristocracy, well, they got their heads chopped off, some of them, but the bourgeoisie, they paid, and what did they do? Their power. That's what they wanted in the French Revolution. The the aristocracy wanted the power. They had the money, but they didn't have the power. So what do? Oh, let's kill off a whole bunch of poor people. We don't care. And now we got more money, and you got the money, you got the power. It's the money versus the many. Hey, get rid of those many. That's okay. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
he who
We
has the
got
gold, he has the gold makes the rules, or in this case, he who has the oil makes the rules. And oh yeah, by the way, going back to the $71 trillion truth and everything else, this has all been going back to from a macroeconomic standpoint to Bretton Woods in 1971 when we got off the gold standard. Basically, oil became the world's commodity, so we backstopped it with the sort of the connection to oil, and that undergirded everything else, and that gave the United States the exorbitant privilege of being the world's reserve currency. And all of the major oligarchs around the world, they're involved. And so, in the end, remember when I said that Epstein was involved with the 2008 great financial crisis? As it turns out, he was laundering money from all sorts of bad actors all over Far East, Russia, this, that, and the other. And it was going into the subprime, which ultimately blew up the world, that he had in liquid capital with Bear Stearns. And he was first in line. While he was in jail, he made the phone call to not just, it was Jess Staley at JP Morgan Chase. And also, it was to Jimmy Kane at Bear Stearns, because they guaranteed him that there was going to be this backdoor bailout, which is exactly what we're telling you. That was called Maiden Lane. And so that bailed out all the bad characters for destroying literally tens of millions of people. Okay. So he who has the Epstein class is the new aristocracy. That's really what it is. Okay. On a global basis, that's who they are. They were all playing ball to destroy the United States and the global economy, because really the United States was the only country on earth that could hold them to account. But then they found ways to break us down. And this is what we're talking about, which is why, if you're sick of the predatory behavior, of the predation of pedophilia, of the billionaires getting away with it while everybody else kids go to die while they get off scot-free, if that makes you disgusted and sick and you need a shower, then clean off with the Clean New Deal.
yeah.
Okay. So moving forward, the bottom line, Medicare for all, renewable energy paradigm,
Education, get rid of private prisons, all kinds of
don't
stuff.
worry about the money. We know how to manage the money. It's just if we get Congress, do we stop the money going to the trillionaire billionaires
Right.
that are soon to be trillionaires that are constantly destroying us? Your choice. Do you want to live under the threat of tyranny? Like, what side would you have been on in the American Revolution? For those of you not doing anything, you're on the side of the English Empire. That's who you are. You're turncoats. That's what we used to call you. Patriots would be on the side of the Clean New Deal. So don't worry about the money and innovation. We've got geniuses beyond comprehension. We just got to get rid of the corruption. So again, has Bernie Sanders ever told us this?
No,
Has AOC?
nobody,
Has
nobody
Elizabeth
has.
Warren?
Nobody has.
I love
Nobody.
Ro Khanna. Has Ro Khanna told us this?
No.
Okay, I could go down the list. My favorite, of course, is Chuck Schumer. That guy's been dancing
Oh,
like the
please.
worm he is, no matter what. That guy put himself in front of the Epstein victims and saying, "We're going to stand on their side until there's justice in
Yeah.
2026." Where was he back then? Hiding the information we're talking about. Okay. Again, there's two columns of our soul, right? Character, integrity, honesty, dignity, decency, all of that. Hypocrisy, duplicity, complicity. What side are all these bastards on? Okay. Evil versus good. That's the bottom line. Moving forward with the next four, actually, the most important one is the Supreme Court of the next level. What do we have to do with the Supreme Court, my friend?
We have to increase to 13 justices and have a code of ethics that actually prosecutes the justices when they break the rules. That's, we have a bazillion rules, but what happens? People break them, no consequences. Break them, no consequences. Break them, no consequences. So go right ahead, keep breaking them, keep breaking them, keep breaking them. And you only stop it when you stop the money and punish. You got to do it.
If you don't hold power to account, you end up with Donald Trump, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right.
Do you not realize that's what's been going on for now decades? So you've got to have 13 justices on the Supreme Court, and we got to do it by any means necessary to weigh out the Roberts Court. And I personally would like to see, like, for example, 2 or 3 years downstream, an investigation requisite the corruption of the Supreme Court. I would love to know exactly how much they got, where it went, what they did, how they did it, I mean, the whole thing. And a canon of ethics is one thing, but I'm thinking of a canon to shoot those guys out of the Supreme Court as a result of being corrupt to their gills, to be quite frank with you. And then moving forward, the next four precepts of the Clean New Deal just mirror the four questions, do they not?
Get rid of presidential immunity, get rid of judicial immunity, get rid of qualified immunity, get rid of the electoral college, stop insider trading in Congress, in the administration. Gotta stop. Gotta stop.
And have term limits.
And
So
term.
look, guys,
It's
all of these
easy.
ideas have been around there before. And by the way, most of what we have introduced, and in addition to, there was many, many years where you couldn't, I'm trying to think of the trades where corporations couldn't inside trade to hyperinflate their stock value. There's a terminology for that. That was illegal for like 4 decades. Okay. They've just done deregulation, desupervision, and decriminalization to create the Epstein class, and then basically buy media so they don't ask the questions. So you're in the dark, so that you're suddenly looking around going, oh my God, the sky is falling, because it is. And it is Armageddon, and it is the rapture. I'm not religious, but the motif is that they both say this is the end of the world because of all of the liars and the evil that the light of good has to penetrate to create supposedly the second coming of Jesus, so that all is well in the world and peace follows. But think about it from an ironic standpoint. The ones that are promulgating the rapture and the Armageddon, are they not all liars? They're all freaking liars. Every
It's
single
a
one.
prerequisite lying. It's to see they have a polygraph test for everybody who goes into the Trump administration. If you lie, you take the polygraph test. If you lie, come on down. Come on down. Okay, that's what you got to do.
That's right. Keep
That's
your mouth shut. Don't ask questions. Do what we tell
right.
you and dance, baby, dance. And you'll get a Gulfstream jet where you can like crazy, monkey love on the taxpayers, dime while you're in ecstasy and you've got people in cages and you're murdering Americans. Can you think of anything more disgusting in terms of this let them eat cake sort of situation? I mean, never in my lifetime, knowing history and everything else. I grew up in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and everything else. This is absurd what's going on, and it's just Lieutenant Frank Trubin of Naked Gun, but it's real, and it's like it's just like, oh my God, it's the end of the end. There's no way we're out of this. And by the way, I will say this to close: who in their right mind thinks we're going to have free and fair elections given everything that's going on? What happens if there's a speedy end to the war in Iran? Trump is feeling like completely emboldened, and he's like, I just took on Iran and I got all of these oligarchs and the billions coming my way and everything else. You think he's going to give up power?
And Ohio just turned over their voting records.
Oh, did they with the Save Act?
What? Well, I think Mark just mentioned it in his in the last truth bomb.
Yeah,
In the last
I don't know if I followed it exactly right because I may have checked out at the end in terms of that last piece. I'm going to look at that after this. But listen, this has been really an enormous conversation, and I hope people tuned in to check this out because it is extremely important. But, I think to close it out, Roseanne gives it her all every single day. Like she says, when you have the truth, you drink from the fountain of youth. What I say is, when you have the truth, you're bulletproof. This is a paradigm of power. We're in a sea shifting scenario where no one has the continuity. They don't have the integrity. They don't have the discipline. They don't have the capacity to try to sell you on what the system is doing in its collapse and how to remedy it. They don't want to do that. Why? Because A, they don't want to reveal their position. B, they think you're stupid. They're pissing on your head, telling you it's rain. Okay? That's what liars do. And
Yep.
tools in the fool circus buy it. But if you've lasted this long, dig in, Like, subscribe, share, share like your life depends on it. All of our lives do. Become a member of the Clean New Deal. Join us, call us, engage with us, become a champion of truth. And ultimately, I'll say this, man, when you, me, and everyone you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in dignity and decency and sustainability and integrity and beauty and opportunity and equality, when we merge in unity behind the Clean New Deal, it is our destiny to purge the misery of tyranny, to unleash the renaissance of possibility. Only if you become a nuclear reaction vector to the big bang of truth we just dropped on your head. Okay? Because whether or not you believe in the Bible, where it says in the opening, let there be light, or you don't believe in religion and you believe in the big bang and in cosmology and physics, and it's the same thing, the big bang, let there be light, right? What that is the power of the supernova becoming energy to force light into darkness. That's what this is. If you can't be compelled by that, you're a monkey, or you got your head in the sand and you are the reason we're here. But guess what? They didn't stick around that long to hear this whole thing. So I know they're not watching. So I insult them. Everybody else who's still watching this, give us a like down in the comment section, give us a share, and give us a hello and tell us who you are and exchange your information with us and tell us you want to get on board. I think we did a really good offering tonight to try to get people on board.
I think so too. And look, all you gotta do, take the first step. Take the first step. That's all you gotta do. And then you can drink like I am. Honest to God. Just drink in the truth. It is gratifying, refreshing, it is rewarding. It's beyond anything I ever imagined. And I will tell you, and Patrick knows this, I never believed in an American dream. What American dream? I ain't ever gonna have no house like a Bud and a Margaret Anderson and the kitten and all that stuff with bedrooms upstairs. Nah, that wasn't for me. But you know what I believe? We are so smart. We have good people. We can solve anything. We can. We have. We have. We've done it.
We've done the impossible and we're going to do it again.
That's right.
Yep.
Failure. Fail. My last words, I'm not going to say another word after this. Ready? Failure is not an option.
And that's in remembrance of my dad's cousin, who, if you can see the rockets on my screen, Jim Lovell, Captain Jim Lovell, where that onwards and upwards and failure is not an option comes from, and Apollo 13, which is our number, and I'm in my 13 year. Guys, look, man, we lay it out every single day. This was long, but this was fun. And if we can do it together, you can too. So thank you for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Onwards and upwards. Take care, Roseanne. I'll call you soon. Be well.